The Boston 12 is the shoe that I have been waiting for. Over the past year, I've cycled through half a dozen shoes looking for the perfect long run shoe. I've gone non-plated, I've gone plated. I've tried a lot of what's out there, and this Boston 12 strikes the perfect balance for me between firm and responsive and cushioned and comfortable. So in this video, I'm gonna break down the Boston 12, how it's done for me so far through about 50 miles. I'm gonna go deep on the upper, the midsole, the outsole, the fit, let you know some of the areas of weakness of the shoe, and I'll end with who it's best for. Before we get into it, if you haven't checked out the Running Shoe Matcher tool yet, go to runningshoematcher.com. This is a really cool tool I built that matches you with the best shoe for you. It could be the Boston 12 based on your goals and preferences. So you can go in there, answer 5 questions about what type of shoe you want, whether you like your shoes soft or firm, whether you want a tempo shoe, a race day shoe, or a daily trainer, and we will match you with the best shoe for you. So it's live right now and it's free. You can check it out at runningshoematcher.com. All right, let's get into it. So the Boston 12 is Adidas's high mileage training shoe that's designed for runners training for long distance events like the half marathon and the marathon. In the development of the shoe, Adidas consults a lot of their elite athletes, so everything that you're seeing going into this shoe has been put through rigorous testing with some of the fastest runners in the world. The Boston 12 carries on a pretty controversial mixed legacy. Early editions of the Boston were really loved as quality marathon training shoes, and the past few, like the 10 and the 11, they were a bit too firm for most recreational runners, although Adidas did claim that elite athletes really liked how they felt. And if you watch any of the Tin Man Elite videos, you will see runners like Reed Fisher wearing that Boston 11 for their marathon pace workouts. So in came the Boston 12 this year to save the day for Adidas, and it's one of their shoes in that Adi Zero line, which is their fastest lineup of running shoes. It's using a dual foam construction, it has glass fiber rods, it has a race day upper, and it has that continental rubber outsole. So all the elements in here are coming together to create a pretty special package. And what works so well about this shoe for me is that all those individual elements, while it is a lot of tech, and I did spend a lot of time going completely away from these plated shoes, and this shoe, it combines to create something that transcends what each of the individual parts do alone. So it is the rare case where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Before I tell you why, let me give you the specs really quick. So this is coming in at 9.5 ounces for that US men's sample size 9. The heel stack is about 37 millimeters. The forefoot stack is about 31 millimeters. So it has a 6 to 7 millimeter drop. It is a neutral shoe and it runs relatively true to size. I'll get into more of the details in the upper and fit section. Let's get into the midsole here. So this is one of those shoes in that latest batch of high mileage trainers like the Convara Pro, the Mach X, and a bunch of the others that is using a dual foam midsole construction. So this white layer that you see here on the bottom is Light Strike. It's actually Light Strike 2.0, which is their new and improved version of that standard EVA foam. Whereas the top layer here is Light Strike Pro. Now Light Strike Pro is Adidas's race day foam. It's that soft and bouncy, well not soft compared to Zoom X, but that bouncy energy returning compound that's gonna give you that fast ride and that sensation that makes you feel like you wanna pick up the pace. Now something interesting about the softness is if you do the push test on here, which I will, you'll see that there's a huge difference in the softness of this foam compared to other Light Strike Pro shoes. So let me grab my Takumi Sen real quick so we can do a comparison. All right, so you see in this hand, I have the Takumi Sen. It's the same Light Strike Pro. It says it right here on the midsole, Light Strike Pro. All right, I'm gonna actually do the durometer test on this so we can get a read. 45, 38, 42, so they definitely softened up the Light Strike Pro. The Light Strike Pro in the Boston 12 is coming in at around a 38 to 39 on the durometer. Closer to 0 is soft, closer to 100 is the firmest it can be. The Light Strike Pro in the Takumi Sen was coming in at around 45. So that is something interesting to note. They softened up the Light Strike Pro. They also softened up the Light Strike 2.0, which if we compare the Light Strike 2.0 in this to the Adi Zero SL, we will also get a reading where the Light Strike 2.0 is much softer in this. So in addition to those two two softer versions of the foams. In here, there are these glass fiber energy rods, which is Adidas's version of a plate, and they're shaped in a way that gives the shoe this rockered, rolling sensation, a nice and aggressive toe spring. So as you're getting into the later phases of that running gait, you can push off nice and easily off the forefoot of the shoe. So if we bend the shoe, we'll see through the rear and the midfoot. It is pretty stiff, but it's nice and flexible up here in the forefoot, which does allow you to use more of those muscles in your foot as you pick up the pace, versus a shoe with a really stiff carbon fiber plate in there. It's not going to give you as much control of the forefoot of the shoe. So the ride of the shoe is where it really gets interesting. Through the first 35 to 40 miles, this felt very blocky, very stiff, very uncomfortable, I do have to say. It was not a comfortable shoe. I could not get the right lockdown. I did everything from shorter, faster efforts to a few longer runs, even just steady state 8 to 10 mile runs. Nothing felt great. I couldn't find the sweet spot of the shoe. It just didn't feel like it was the right shoe for me. I think that's due to a few factors. The first is the upper of this. If it's not completely dialed in, it does mess with the ride a little bit. There's other shoes where I've had this happen, like the Hyperion Max. That's another shoe where you really have to get the upper right to run at a fast pace. Same thing with another Adidas shoe, the Takumi Sen, which I just pulled out. So that's one thing. The other thing is the midsole foam does take a little bit of time to break in. I did experience that in the Adidas Audi Zero SL as well, especially around the heel area of the shoe. This Light Strike standard EVA foam just needs some time to soften up. What I noticed is a good way to check if it's broken in or not is when you start to get multiple creases in the heel area. So look at this. We got some nice creases back here. And for me, that's how I can tell that this foam is ready to go. It's softened up, it's adapted to my foot. Extremely unscientific way to do things, but that's what I noticed when the shoe started to feel right for me, is when those creases started to appear in the heel area of that standard EVA Light Strike 2.0 foam. It was a run last week. It was last Tuesday. I did 2 by 3 miles with my friend Cam out at the Greenway in North Charlotte, and I told him, dude, I think this is the run where the shoe is finally starting to win me over. Up until that point, it felt blocky, it felt stiff, but halfway through that run, it just started feeling right. The foam started to soften up. It felt like the shoe was one with my foot. And the word that comes to mind is smooth, right? From blocky to smooth. That's the transition that happened with the shoe once it was broken in. It had a really nice cushioned, responsive, and smooth feeling, which is really the key element that you want in a marathon training shoe. You don't want something that's gonna be aggressive. You don't want something that's gonna be overly soft or overly firm. You want something that's gonna have a nice smooth ride that can encourage you to run with the smooth and relaxed form, because that is the key to running a fast marathon. So for me, after that 40-mile mark, this really started to feel like a nice shoe. The Light Strike Pro up here gives a great energy return off the forefoot. The Light Strike in the back does make it a nice stable landing, and then when you push off, you are getting a really solid chunk of this supercritical TPEE foam up in the forefoot, and you can definitely feel it compress and push you off as you push the pace up in the forefoot of the shoe. So the last run I did in the shoe was a 16-mile long run. It was a 6-mile warm-up, 4 miles at a marathon effort, and then 6-mile cool down, just cruising to 16. And as I got into that marathon pace portion of the run, it just started to feel right. It felt amazing going down from, started at about 6:50, worked my way down to about 6:18 pace. It felt nice and fluid. It felt like I was in control of the shoe. The shoe wasn't controlling me. Something that I tend to get in other bouncy shoes with super foams is it gets a little bit out of control. I've never felt like that in this shoe. You're definitely still in control of the shoe. You're working the machine isn't working you. And it was perfect for those marathon pace efforts. I think this is one of the best marathon training shoes I've tried, if not the best marathon training shoe that I've tried in the past year, because of how smooth and control it feels at those marathon pace efforts. I will say a key area of weakness with this shoe, one of the biggest downfalls, is the cornering. I think it has to do with the way that the lockdown is in the back, how the upper connects to the foam, but it still doesn't feel right on cornering to me, even when it's broken in. It still feels a little bit unstable here. This upper is almost paper thin, so when I'm cornering, it felt like my ankles weren't always completely locked into the shoe. That is an area that hopefully they'll work on in the Boston 13. I'm guessing that's just going to be an upper revision, so I would like to see another upper. I think that could greatly improve the ride. All right, so let's dive a little bit deeper into the upper here. Again, I think this is one of the key areas of weakness of the shoe, and really the only area that I still don't love now that I've warmed up to the shoe. So first, starting with the fit, The midfoot is really narrow. It's not uncommon for Adidas shoes, but the upper in the toe box area is wider, which makes that narrow midfoot a little bit weird. The feeling isn't completely locked in. I'm not sure if they spec this to a certain, I don't know, European foot or elite athlete foot, but for my foot, which tends to work with most shoes, works with Hoka, works with Saucony. Saucony are a little tight, but tends to work well with most shoes. This just doesn't feel like the perfect fit. And I know a lot of you all out there as well are saying that the upper is a little bit wide in the toe box. So something to consider, you could probably size down half a size from your standard size. I'm glad I didn't do that just because my feet are still a little bit banged up from some other shoes that I was running in earlier this year. But most runners could likely size down half a size. The other issue with this upper is because it's so thin, it does not provide a lot of support and stability, especially around this rear heel area. That is a big area of weakness. As a 9.5 ounce shoe, it's surprising that the upper is so paper thin, right? A lot of even daily trainers are below 9 ounces now, so I'm not sure where all that weight is coming from. I guess a lot of this is the Light Strike 2.0 foam that they have in the bottom of the shoe. I would like to see them lighten up the bottom of the shoe a little bit so they can add more structure and padding to this upper, because ultimately it is a training shoe. It is not a race day shoe, so it should not have this uncomfortable race-like upper. Now, I think this shoe would be perfect if they just put the Adi Zero SL upper on top of the Boston 12. If you look at the Adi Zero SL upper here, you can see, look how much padding it has around the heel collar here. It has a ton of structure and support. It has one of those hard plastic pieces in the back here which hold the ankle in place. And it has this rounded off ankle area so that it's not putting undue pressure on your Achilles. If we compare that to what we're getting in the Boston 12 here, you'll see there's a little bit of support, but I can still push this down. But there's basically no support in the rest of the shoe other than that tiny Achilles piece. The laces are also not the most comfortable because the tongue is so thin and it's not padded. To get the right lockdown, you really need to cinch down these laces, which will bite. I've had a couple of commenters suggest switching to regular softer laces, which I might do, although these blue ones just look so sweet, so I don't really want to mess with it. Last thing I want to note about the upper, so when Adidas came out with this latest batch of shoes, we weren't really sure what this little heel collar thing was in the back here. I know Robbie from Believe in the Run said it was for preppy runners to pop their collars. I discovered it is a heel tab. Now, maybe I'm late to the party, but that's what this thing is for. It's to, you flip it up and it helps you put on the shoe. There's no heel tab other than this little thing, but it is quite useful getting the shoe on your foot. Now, in terms of the outsole, there's not much that I need to say here. It is that beautiful Continental rubber, very sticky. I did a little bit of a skid test running along, kind of jamming my feet onto the slick pavement, and this does not budge. It's gonna last for a ton of miles. I do believe this back here is Adidas' standard rubber, which is on the Adi Zero SL. On that shoe, it's been great. It's held up really well, and it's not worn through for me up to 270, 280 miles. So I think this outsole is gonna be extremely durable. As for the rest of the shoe, Adidas is known for having some pretty good durability, and in my experience has been very durable, other than the rubber on the Takumi Sen, just because it is a very thin layer of racing rubber. But in the Adi Zero SL, it's been really durable. I know that Boston 12, one of the main key areas of praise with it, despite its very firm feel, was that it could last for tons of miles. So with this, I'm gonna plan to take it to 400 miles, and I'll update you as we get along throughout the life of the shoe. Now, I'm gonna do full comparison videos, and this video is already getting kind of long, but I did want to compare it to the Speed 3 really quickly, because this is one of the shoes that a lot of runners spec against the Boston 12. So in terms of how it stacks up against the Speed 3, the Saucony here is going to be much softer. The Power Run PB, beaded Pima midsole, and the Saucony is just a much softer, a lot more uncontrolled feeling foam than we see in the Light Strike Pro here in the Boston 12. In addition to that, because the Saucony has a plastic plate, a nylon plate here versus the glass fiber rods in the Boston 12, it just has a much softer, not as controlled feel as the Boston 12. The Saucony is a bit lighter, which might be preferred if you are a lighter runner, if you prefer having the lighter shoe on your foot. But the Boston 12 just feels like a more elegant piece of equipment, while the Saucony Speed 3 feels a little bit like a kid's toy. Now, I saw on Reddit there's this beautifully written comment a few months ago that said essentially that thing. I'll try to dig it up and attribute it to you, but if I can't, that's really the key emphasis of these. The Saucony feels more toy-like. It feels a little bit more fun, a little bit more joyful. Boston 12 feels more serious, like a piece of sports equipment machinery that you're gonna wanna put on and do an aggressive workout. These are both good marathon training shoes, but the Boston 12 is meeting me where I'm at right now. I want a little bit of a more firm, controlled feeling. Saucony Speed 3 is a little bit more versatile if you don't like a firm feeling all the time, but for me, I prefer the Boston 12. In terms of who the Boston 12 is going to be best for, this is a great shoe if you're looking to tackle marathon training and you're looking for something that can handle long runs as well as some of those weekly workouts that you'll have in there, like lactate threshold pace, even interval training. Now, my primary use case for this shoe is going to be long runs as well as any longer areas of work that I have. For example, 2x3 miles, 3x2 miles. I do think you could use this for interval training. It wouldn't be my first choice because I'd prefer something below 8 ounces. For that, what you are getting in this shoe is a bit more cushion, a bit more comfort than other workout shoes. This has more than 30 millimeters of stack in the forefoot, whereas a shoe like the Mach 5 or the Rebel V3, those are gonna have a lower than 30 millimeter stacks in the forefoot, so aren't gonna be as comfortable and cushioned. Now, some of you could use this as a daily trainer. I do not recommend using plated shoes as daily trainers. I prefer to use non-plated shoes, help build up leg strength, use some of those stabilizing muscles that don't get worked as much in plated shoes like this. The benefit of using a shoe like this for long runs is that, again, it will take some of that stress off of your legs, so you aren't gonna be getting worked as much, which will help in recovery. You're not gonna feel as beat up running a long run in a shoe like this versus something like the Nike Pegasus. At $160, I think this is worth it. I think this is a bargain. If you look at what other shoes are priced at $160, for example, a shoe like the New Balance 1080 V13, which I just picked up recently, that's $165, more expensive than this, and you can only use that for recovery running. Whereas this, you could get away with using it as a daily trainer. I won't, but can be used for long runs, shorter, faster efforts, and there's more tech in here. You're getting a more advanced ride than you get with something like the 1080 V13. So yes, it's worth it. I highly recommend it. If you need a new marathon training shoe, this should be your go-to for that winter season. All right, guys, there you have it. Those are my thoughts on the Adidas Boston 12. Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking and subscribing, and I'll be back tomorrow with another video.